be with me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2021 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where your man, Louie T, aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2021 NFL Draft using our grading scale from 5 to 1. Each pick will be assessed a score. We will tally up all of those scores, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you out there are in total control of who's next, as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Broncos, next, Denver, next, Denver Broncos. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Denver Broncos. And this was the first draft of new GM George Paton in Denver, and he got 10 selections out of this draft, and he's looking to build this thing in an image of his own. And he comes in into a situation with a team that I think is very talented already, especially on the defensive side of the football. Some of the moves made in free agency helps to bolster that, but I think with some of the moves made in this draft, coupled with moves made in free agency, this is a team set up for success if they can get something from the quarterback position, and that's what remains to be seen in Denver. I think the clock's ticking on Drew Lock. Obviously, you traded for Teddy Bridgewater. If you're not happy with what you're getting from Drew Lock, I think he will have a quick hook, and they will turn to Teddy Bridgewater, because this is a good enough team to win with average quarterback play. I don't know how far it will take you, but you are a good enough team defensively to compete in that conference, in that division, if you can get some semblance of consistency from the quarterback position. That said, I do think that the Broncos would have approached this draft a little bit differently had they known what they know now, which is Ja'Wuan James was going to tear his Achilles and miss the entire season. They subsequently released him after he got injured away from the team facility. And I think maybe the first round pick might have been an offensive tackle. Who knows? You know, I'm just speculating. Maybe Patrick Surtain II was the pick all along. I don't know if they were interested in moving out of 9 or not, but all in all, knowing what they know now, maybe they go out and draft a guy as a tackle. I felt like what they did in the first round felt like a luxury pick at the time. But now, you know, kind of looking at it in hindsight, maybe it wasn't a luxury. Either way, let's get this thing kicked off and talk about the Denver Broncos 2021 NFL Draft. And we start in the first round, 9th overall selection, defensive back out of Alabama, Patrick Surtain II is the pick. This is a no-brainer right here. This kid has NFL lineage and bloodlines. His dad was a standout corner in the league for years. He looks the part of a guy ready to come in, hit the ground running, and be dominant. You add him to a cornerback group that may be the most talented and diverse in the league. You know, you go out, you get Kyle Fuller. Unsuspectedly, he was released by the Chicago Bears, and you swoop in, sign him to a 1-year deal. You already went out and signed a corner in free agency from Washington in Ronald Darby. You put all of that together with Surtain now in the mix. You re-upped with Justin Simmons, finally got him on a long-term deal. You drafted a couple of safeties. This defense looks legit, and Surtain II is going to give you that extra added oomph on the outside to really make this thing pop. You drafted some young guys last year, Ojemudia and all of those guys. There is a lot of stuff in Denver in the secondary, and Surtain II is going to come in and fit like hand in glove and ultimately be your number 1 corner when it's all said and done. I've already broken him down, so I'm not going to do that here. I'll just tell you that this is a slam dunk, no-brainer, no doubt about it, knock it out of the park pick. First round, 9th overall selection, cornerback out of Alabama, Patrick Surtain II is, of course, a 5 to get this Broncos draft started off. And just as a side note, I will have the links down in the comment section of this video pinned for the players that I don't break down in this draft series breakdown, because I've already broken them down in the draft prospects 101 series. So the links to their thorough breakdowns will be pinned in the comment section. That said, second round, 35th overall selection, running back out of North Carolina. Javonte Williams is the pick for the Denver Broncos. And this is a guy that was part of a two-headed monster at North Carolina, put up some gaudy numbers in 2020, was right around the 1,000-yard mark in 2019 as well. And so this is a guy that's put up some pretty good statistics, brings a nice package to the table. Let's talk about what Javonte Williams did in his collegiate career, throw some numbers at you, and then we'll get into his strengths and weaknesses. So in 35 career games, he had 366 total rushes, which, I mean, there's hardly any tread off those tires. I mean, this guy has a lot to offer because of that, dual, running backfield with him and Michael Carter. There's a lot of tread left on these tires with Javonte Williams. 2,297 rush yards for Williams, averaging over 6 yards per pop in his career. 29 touchdowns on the ground to go with 50 catches for 569 yards and 4 scores as a receiver. So this is a guy that was highly productive while at UNC. We'll see if that translates to the NFL game. His strengths, good blend of size, speed, and power. This was a guy that was playing up around 220 while at Carolina. I think he's looking to show that he can be a bit faster, and so he cut some of that weight. He was down to 212 at his pro day. But when you look at his body type, he's a big physical guy at 5'10". 212 is what he weighed in. He'll probably be more around 215, 216 when he's playing on game days. And you're talking about a 4.55 guy in terms of a 40. Not blazing fast, but plenty fast for what he brings to the table. It's a nice blend of size, speed, and power. Runs physically behind his pads. I think that's the first thing that jumps out at you when you watch him, is just how many times he's able to bounce off of a defender looking to come in with a physical shoulder instead of wrapping up. And he'll just pinball off of a guy because he runs physically behind his pads very, very well. He drops the shoulder and has a low center of gravity, does a great job of contact balance, which is the next pro, which, I'm a huge advocate of at the running back position. When we talk about running backs, one of the things I always reference is your contact balance. If that's not exceptional, you can't be a dynamic back at the NFL level. Too many times you're going to be contacted. You're going to have to find a way to keep on your feet. And he's able to do that tremendous contact balance. And part of that is because he runs behind his pads so well. Exhibits quality patience and vision. You'll see this guy kind of set blocks up, kind of wait as he gets through that first hole. He wants to bounce it outside, but he's waiting for that tackle to come off of that double team and get to the second level and get to that, corner or get to that linebacker. And then he'll cut off of that block and get to the outside. So you see a guy with tremendous patience and vision at times, and that's going to serve him well at the next level. Has MYM components and BYOB capabilities. So I'm using a lot of abbreviations and letters there. What do they all mean? All right, so MYM is make you miss. He's got make you miss components. So he's a guy that'll spin on you in a heartbeat. He's a guy that'll jump cut and make you miss. He's for a big guy. He's got some moves. He's got some quicks, right? And then he's got the ability to be his own blocker. That's what BYOB is. Be your own blocker. And look, in the NFL, they're going to be unblocked hitters, free rushers all the time, where they just got too many guys for you to block. They come with a run blitz. They guess right. Somebody's coming free. You got to make that guy miss. In order to take a 2-3 yard loss in the backfield and turn it into a 2-yard gain, there's a big difference between 2nd and 13 and 2nd and 8. In order to make that happen, you got to make that first guy miss. Sometimes that's all the difference between a drive staying alive. On 3rd and 1, you decide to hand it off. They get a free hitter in the backfield. You got to make that guy miss. You got to find a way to get back to the line of scrimmage and try to power your way to that first down. He's got that ability to do that, be his own blocker when there's a free guy coming at him. He can do that. fresh legs heading into the NFL. I've already talked about this, so I don't need to spend a ton of time on it. But the fact that this guy's only got 366 carries, for some backs, that's 1 year of service in college football. You know, they're guys that they get it 300 and some odd times on the ground, and then they catch it another 30 or 40 times because they're their team's workhorse. He split the backfield with Michael Carter, so there's a lot of tread left on the tires for Javonte Williams going into the league. You got to love that if you're the Denver Broncos. Shows 3-down running back flashes, although very inconsistent at times. He does show the ability to do all of the things you want your third down back to do, to be able to catch it out of the backfield, even though he had a massive drop against Florida State in that ball game, ultimately cost them that football game. Don't know if they were going to win, but it's 4th down. He's wide open, got to make that catch. He drops it. They lose the football game. Anyway, he shows the ability to catch it. He shows the ability to block. Not always the most consistent in that department either, but he shows the ability to be able to do that, and obviously he can run the football. So he's got 3-down running back capabilities. Got to be able to get that out of him. He's got to be more consistent, but all of the tools are there for him to be a 3-down back at the next level. And finally, collegiate production and nose for the end zone. You're talking about a guy that, as I mentioned, on less than 170 carries over the last 2 years, was almost over 1,000 yards in both years. Had 933 in 19 and 1,140 carries in 2020. And you're talking about a guy that averaged over 6 yards per carry in those 2 seasons combined. And last year, the man had 19 rushing touchdowns to go with 3 through the air. So you're talking about 22 total touchdowns for Javonte Williams, a guy that just has a nose for the end zone. And there are just certain guys that can smell pay dirt, and he's one of those guys that can find the end zone. So you go to his weaknesses. The biggest weakness for him, if this weakness didn't exist, he'd be a first-round back. And that's he lacks second-level burst or home run speed. Like, this is a guy that's going to hit a bunch of doubles, a good amount of triples, but he's going to get caught from behind at the next level if he's got a long enough run, a long enough way to go. If he busts off a run that requires a 70-yard gallop to the end zone, he's going to get caught by behind from somebody. If there's any speed in that secondary and somebody with an angle, they're going to catch Javonte Williams. He just doesn't have that last gear you need to be able to run away from the defense and score. That said, if it's a 70-yard, run to the end zone, he's going to get you 55 on that play. He's going to get you 62 down to the 8-yard line, but he doesn't have that last gear to get you into the end zone, but does have enough speed to make a bunch of big plays. This is a guy that only had, if I'm not mistaken, only 2 runs of over 40 yards in his career while at UNC. So that tells you that this is a guy that doesn't break off a bunch of big runs. Don't love him in pass pro and inconsistent as a pass catcher. I've already kind of noted that as well. Not the best pass protector. I think he can get better in that regard, but he does show the willingness to do it. I just think he's inconsistent in that department. But catching the football, I think he can catch it. I don't think he's natural in that capacity, but I think he's got good enough hands that he can continue to work at that and get better and become a more consistent, reliable, dependable pass catcher out of the backfield. But that said, as I mentioned earlier, all the components are there for him to be a 3-down back, but the inconsistency is a problem for me at this very moment. But when you put this complete package together, the speed, the size, the physicality, he reminds me a lot of Kareem Hunt coming out of Toledo, and that's who I comp him to at this very moment. Now, I think Kareem Hunt was a much better pass catcher coming into the league. He was more consistent in that regard, but much like Kareem Hunt, he doesn't fumble the ball. Just Javonte Williams, he's not a fumbler. He doesn't put it on the carpet. Remember, Kareem Hunt was not a fumbler at Toledo and hasn't really been one in the NFL either. And they look very similar. Williams is a little bit faster than Hunt coming out of Toledo, but they are very similar in their stature, the way that they play, and their abilities on the football field. So that's my player comp for Javonte Williams, and I think this is a fantastic pick. You allow Phillip Lindsay to leave in free agency, And so now you've got Melvin Gordon the third, and now Javonte Williams in that backfield. I think it's a really solid 1-2 punch, and I think you expect this guy to eventually take over as the lead back in that backfield here in the near future. And so in the second round, 35th overall pick, running back out of North Carolina, Javonte Williams for me is a 4 for the Denver Broncos as we get to their third pick in this draft, third round, 98th overall, offensive lineman out of Wisconsin, Whitewater, Quinn Meinerz is the pick. And Quinn Meinerz is a guy that really took over at the Senior Bowl, got into everyone's consciousness at the Senior Bowl, and really made himself some money. And we've seen this happen before with other small school guys on the interior doing the same thing. I remember a few years ago, interior offensive lineman out of Hobart College made a name for himself at the Senior Bowl. I think it was Ali Marpet at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine, and ultimately was selected in this very third round, I believe, by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if not the second. So we've seen guys do this before, and Quinn Meinerz is the next in line to do so. 6'3", 320 pounds. Is this redshirt junior, and that tells you all you need to know, that this guy's a redshirt junior coming out. Normally, when you see a guy coming from a small school like Wisconsin Whitewater, over in Canada, you usually see these guys be, seniors. You want to play as much ball as you can possibly play, put as much tape out there for these guys to consume to give yourself the best chance to be drafted. And not only did this guy come out early, but he ends up being a third-round pick. So he gambled on himself, and he won. 29 straight starts at left guard, and he dominated the Senior Bowl. Those are two things you have to understand, because there's not a ton of tape out there for us to consume, unless you're plugged in and you've got connects. There weren't many opportunities to watch this guy. I was able to watch 2 games of his, and but really what I focused on was the Senior Bowl, because when you see guys like Quinn Meinerz, you wonder, is the step up in competition going to be too much? Is he going to be overwhelmed by the level of athleticism and physicality that he didn't see in college? Is he going to be overwhelmed by that at the Senior Bowl? And he was dominant at the Senior Bowl. He looked like he was very comfortable, and at times looked like he was a man amongst boys out there. So his strengths: big, physical, country strong individual. We've all seen the videos of this guy out in the Canada woods, lifting up logs, knocking over trees, lifting up, tanks and all kinds of craziness, or propane tanks and things of that nature. So this guy is country strong. He's big, he's physical, he's nasty, he's all the things you like in your offensive lineman. Tremendous length for the pivot position. You're talking about a guy with 33 and 3/8 inch arms. Like, generally, you stick guys inside the center position because they don't have a length. They're not the tallest guy in the world. So you want to stick the guy with the short, stubby arms inside because you can protect him. This guy's got long tackle type arms. So, that's another plus for Quinn Meinerz here as a center potentially. Former wrestler and with mauler tendencies. Look, anybody will tell you, offensive line coaches, scouts, they'll tell you, we want the guys inside in the trenches that were former wrestlers. They've got technique. They've got physicality. They know how to use their hands. All of those things translate from the wrestling ring or circle to the football field. So the fact that he's got that one-on-one experience inside, in the wrestling, he's able to use that on the football field, and you see it at times with the way he maneuvers. And really, I think where it shows itself is his physicality, man. He's nasty, which is the next strength. He's a nasty boy. A nasty boy. He's a nasty boy. That's what you want in your offensive lineman. I told you, it's not a prerequisite. You don't have to be nasty to be a good offensive lineman, but boy, does it help. I prefer my guy to have at least a semblance of a nasty streak. This guy has a full-blown nasty, he's just nasty, period. This isn't a streak. He's just nasty. So he can move men against their will, and he's a nasty boy. Strong vice grip. When he puts his claws on you and clamps down, guys don't usually get away. He's able to lock you up and you're not going anywhere. So you love that about him as well. Strong vice grip. When he gets his hands on you, it's over. And again, I said this already. I'll reiterate this because this is important when you're talking about a small school guy that played Division III football. He dominated the Senior Bowl. I mean, he was unfazed by the level of competition elevating. He was really oblivious to it. He went in like he was still playing at Wisconsin Whitewater and dominated the Senior Bowl. And that's why he's here in Denver as a third-round pick. You go to his weaknesses. His shoulders can get too far out in front of his toes at times. He's too anxious. He wants to tear a guy a new asshole. And sometimes, instead of him waiting for the action to come his way, he wants to go and initiate. And sometimes he's too anxious. He gets excited. His shoulders get way out in front of his toes, and that's a recipe for disaster. You're asking to fall flat on your face, or you're asking for a guy to swim move you, and next thing you know, you're on your knees on the ground. And you see that from him from time to time on tape. Again, easily coachable and fixable, easily fixable. So it's not something you really need to be overly concerned about. Lateral quickness in question, even in the Senior Bowl, I thought it was something that I saw some guys, on Zariki from Washington, I saw him run right by him, So I think there is a lateral quickness question. In 2019, I'm watching him on tape, and I saw a couple of times where guys were able to go around him. He's not the most agile guy laterally. He can move, but if you've got elite quickness, I think you can beat him, and that's why I think the move to center is ideal, because it's a lot less likely he's going to be matched up with a guy one-on-one. And if he is, that guy's not going to be the quickest in the world. And furthermore, when you're inside at center, there's a lot more trash for guys that have to work around. Whereas if you're at guard, you're somewhat on an island. That tackle's got his own problems to worry about. And so there's a lot more space to operate for a guy with quickness. You go inside the center and you got a guard on each side. There's not as much space to operate. So I think you can reduce some of those issues by putting him inside at center. And that's where he's ultimately going to play more likely than not at the next level. And then finally, level of competition. I mentioned that loosely because I just told you the guy wasn't fazed by Senior Bowl competition. So, but there is a difference between Senior Bowl competition and NFL competition. So we'll see if the next jump in competition affects him, or if he is unfazed just like he was at the Senior Bowl. So anyway, this is a guy that I really feel good about. And if you're the Broncos, you feel like you got a guy that could be a dog at the next level in Quinn Meinerz. And for me, in the third round, 98th pick overall, offensive lineman out of Wisconsin Whitewater, Quinn Meinerz, for me, is a 4. This guy has road grader written all over him. And I think he's got some things he's got to iron out. But if you've got a good offensive line coach that is able to mold this massive slab of clay, I think you're going to come out with a guard that's going to be, Pro Bowl caliber if he's continued to be schooled and coached up in the right way. So we move on to the next pick, third round, another third round selection, the third for the Denver Broncos, 105th overall, linebacker out of the Ohio State University. Baron Browning is the selection. And I made a mistake there. This is the second third round pick, 4th pick overall for the Broncos in this draft. I've already broken Baron Browning down already, so I'm not going to do that here. But what I will tell you is I think he's got some untapped potential. I think that this guy is so versatile. He can rush the quarterback. I think he is a guy that can run. He's athletic. He's physical. I think that I felt like he was underutilized at Ohio State and somewhat muzzled. And I think if put in the right positions, this guy could be a dynamite player at the next level. So he could be the missing piece to that front seven for the Denver Broncos. And I think this is a good get. And I think this is tremendous value. This is exactly where I had him coming off the board. He is a day 2 pick and a late day 2 pick at that. So this is perfect value, good pick. At a position of need for the Broncos. I like this pick a lot, and I think you might have gotten yourself a gem here in the third round, 105th overall pick, linebacker out of the Ohio State University. Baron Browning, for me, is a 4. As I mentioned already, broke him down. The link will be in the comment section, pinned along with the video for Patrick Surtain II. We move on to your next selection, 5th round, 152nd pick overall. Safety out of Texas, Caden Sterns is the pick. Caden Sterns, 6 feet, 202 pounds. So the 6 feet, 210 you see in front of you is inaccurate. He was 202 pounds at his pro day, where he ran a blazing 4.4 flat and jumped 42 inches in the vert. Really helped himself at his pro day. So again, that could be weight cut down to be as fast as possible, or that could have been more closer to his playing weight than the 210. Either way, you'll see some discrepancies with some of the weights and heights that I have, because there was no combine this year. So a lot of these heights and weights I was snatching off of the website of the school, and obviously the school is usually off with the height and weight. So anyhow, this is a guy that jumped onto the scene at Texas as a freshman, lit it up, got everybody excited, and then really was disappointing the last 2 years while at Texas. A lot of holes in his game started to arise. So I'm not madly in love with this pick. Personally, I think you got lucky, because the guy that you picked after Caden Sterns should have been the guy you should have picked first. And then if you really wanted Sterns and he was still available, you go and get him. But we'll see. I think you wanted this kind of speed. This guy has a ton of speed, and you can't coach that. And the guy that I thought was better of the two doesn't have this kind of speed. So we'll see if that's exactly why he was taken, because of his ability to run. That said, 29 games, 172 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 8 pass breakups, 5 INTs, 4 of which came in his freshman year, and 1 blocked kick in his career for Caden Sterns. So strengths: height, weight, speed specimen. Guy is 6 feet, 200 and about around 200 pounds, and runs a 4.4 flat. So he checks off all the boxes there as a defensive back. Tremendous athleticism. I talked about the 42-inch vert, talked about the 4.4 speed. Guy can run, he can jump, he can do all of those things. So he's a tremendous athlete. Aggressive mindset as a tackler / hitter. It can backfire, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the breakdown, but you want a guy that has that aggressive mindset, that is willing to put his body out there, looking to be aggressive and physical, and that's Caden Sterns in a nutshell. Has ball skills when in position. I talked about the 5 interceptions, but 4 of them, have to understand this and give it proper context, 4 of them came in his freshman year. So again, you can't be certain that that's something that's going to continue at the next level, but when he's in position, he is a guy that can make plays on the football. Speed and traits to be a single high safety. I mean, one of the biggest predictors of a guy being able to play single high is, can he run? Does he have sideline or red line to red line speed? In the case of Caden Sterns, he's answered that question. He does. But, sometimes that can be overrated, because you can be the fastest guy in the world, but if you can't anticipate, if you can't see it before it happens, you'll still find yourself showing up on the scene late. And I think that's part of the concern with Caden Sterns at times, is he just doesn't see it well all the time. But he's got the speed. He's got everything you're looking for to be a single high free safety. And then special teams value. When you run that fast and you have that mindset of being aggressive and a hitter, you can be a core special teamer if nothing else. And I think he has that going for him as well as he enters the league. You go to his weaknesses, and there are quite a bit of them here. So, has long speed, but lacks short area twitch. So what do I mean by that? You give this guy a runway and you let him take off, yeah, he's going to run that 4.4. But in short, tight areas, and a dead giveaway for me is the safety that wants to play 11 yards off. Now, some of that is scheme. In a scheme, you're supposed to be, a 9-by-1 or 10 or 11-by-1. But when you have confidence in your ability, you come up and you challenge guys in the slot. When you drop over the slot, you challenge guys. You make them work, and you get in their face. You don't give up easy, cheap completions. And then with that said, okay, so you're playing off 9-by-1. All right, you're playing 9 yards off and 1 yard in, or 1 yard outside, depending on the coverage inside or outside. Whatever the case may be, you still have to have that ability to drive on something underneath. If that guy's running a slant from the slot, and you're checking him, and you see that it's a slant, you don't want to overcommit, bite on slant, and go, and he's up the field and you're beat. But at the same time, that guy sticks his foot in the ground and he runs that slant, and you know it's a slant. You got to be able to stick your foot in the ground, and you got to be able to break on that thing. If that guy's running a shallow cross and that's your guy, and you got to follow him across the formation, you got to be able to stick your foot in the ground and go and chase that thing down. And he struggles in those change of direction situations, and he's not as fluid for a guy, and that's the next weakness. So go ahead and lump those two things in. Doesn't change direction with the fluidity of someone with his athletic prowess. Should. I mean, when you see a guy with his athleticism, you just expect an easy mover, a guy that's going to change direction, flip his hips, stick his foot in the ground, drive, and click and close. All of those things that you expect from an explosive, dynamic, twitchy type of athlete like Caden Sterns. But he's not twitchy. You know, he's got long speed, but he's not twitchy. And that's surprising because the 42-inch vertical says he's twitchy. But when you watch him in his movement skills, he's not. Maybe he is. He's just unsure of what he's supposed to do. Maybe that's the case. But I was unimpressed with him in coverage. That is for certain as a slot defender. Is very OC. Okay, what is OC? Out of control. He's very, very OC. Misses a ton of tackles. This guy comes like he's shot out of a cannon, and he'll run right by the ball carrier. Barely get a finger on him. And it's too many times he comes in there, lays a shoulder, doesn't wrap up, and falls off of a guy. Too many times I'm seeing Caden Sterns come up and run support and not get the job done. And then he takes poor angles to the ball. I just talked about him coming like he shot up out of a cannon, and he takes a poor angle to the ball. But not only that, he takes poor angles to the ball when it's in flight as well, and that could be problematic. You know, just because you're fast doesn't mean you can take sloppy angles to the football, because you can get beat. You know, I'm watching him in run support, and his, linebacker feels like, okay, I should be able to go in, force this guy to the outside, and Caden's going to have my back because he's going to take the proper angle and push this guy out of bounds for either a no gain or a gain of 1. And Sterns takes a poor angle and lets the running back turn the corner and pick up about 9 or 10 on a play that he should have gotten 1 yard. Sterns just took a poor angle to the ball, and that's problematic for me. So there's a lot of deficiencies here, some things he's got to clean up. But one thing's for sure, the guy's got tremendous athleticism, speed. Again, he checks all the boxes off. He looks the part. And it's the job of Vic Fangio and your defensive backs coach and all of those guys to get the most out of Caden Sterns. And if you can do that, he may end up being a steal for you in the 5th round. But right now, I'm not blown away by what I've seen from him. And my player comp for him is Troy Apke, a player for the Washington football team drafted out of Penn State. Apke ran a 4.3 4.40 at the combine. He blew everybody away with his athleticism. But he's got a problem with depth perception, doesn't take proper angles. His eye discipline is all over the place. He misses tackles, takes poor angles to the football, and he's on life support as a member of the Washington football team right now. But what's saving him is his ability to play special teams, and that may ultimately be the saving grace of Caden Sterns. We will see. But maybe this staff is able to get the most out of this kid, and he turns out to be a stud. All the pieces are there. If he can get back to his freshman year at Texas, where he was dynamite and one of the better freshmen in the country, the Broncos may have themselves a steal here in the 5th round, 152nd pick overall. Safety out of Texas, Caden Sterns for me is a 2. Just too many problems here for me. I love the athleticism. I love the talent that he possesses, but just too many mistakes, too many mental gaffes, too many inconsistencies in his game. And personally, I thought it was risky taking him above the guy that we're going to talk about next here in the 5th round, 164th overall selection. Safety out of Indiana, Jamar Johnson is the pick. This is the guy that you should have taken first at the safety position. If you were looking for a defensive back that could come in and play in today's NFL, can play a little bit of the slot, can play the safety position, eye discipline. He's one of those guys that just always seems to be in the right position at the right time to make a play on the football. He was outstanding in 2020. His arrow is pointing up, whereas Sterns is pointing down. Doesn't mean that Sterns, again, who is more talented than Jamar Johnson, can't put it all together at the next level. But I'm a Jamar Johnson guy personally. Thought he would go a little bit higher in the draft, but I think people were turned off by his lack of speed. And it's not terrible, but that's how bad it has gotten in the NFL, where a 4.58 is turning people off because of the amount of speed that we see with these safeties. They're like, bona fide corners now. You got to run like a corner almost in order to garner attention. And, the safety position is one of those interesting positions because teams don't necessarily feel like they got to have one of those guys early. They can wait on the safety position. And I think Jamar Johnson was one of those guys that was hurt by that. But nonetheless, 6 feet 205, so you can see a little off there. He's not 6'1", 197, but rather 6 feet 205 pounds. In his career at Indiana, he played in 31 games, had 70 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 6 pass breakups, and 7 INTs, including 1 to the crib. He had 4 this past year, 2 against Ohio State's Justin Fields. So this is a guy that just finds himself in the right place at the right time, and there's something to be said about that. Strengths, quality size for the position. Again, 6 feet, over 200 pounds. He looks the part of a defensive back, whether that be a nickel or a safety. He looks the part of a defensive back at the NFL level. Easy mover that finds the football. He's much more fluid than that of Caden Sterns on the football field. He's a guy that transitions well, finds himself right around the action, balls in the air. He's in a position to make a play. He's just one of those guys that just gets it, high football IQ. Speaking of which, high IQ player that's rarely out of position is the next strength. So, again, that's the kind of football player you're getting. Nope, he's not the fastest. He's not running a 4.4 like Caden Sterns. But I assure you, he'll take that 4.58 and be in a better position to make a play on the ball than Caden Sterns with his 4.4 flat. So, it's just something about knowing where to go, studying the game, knowing the tendencies of the offense you're playing against, and putting yourself in the right position to make plays. Tremendous ball skills. I mean, that's evident by the 7 career interceptions. He had an interception, at least 1 in every season of his career. And his number of interceptions doubled each year of his career. Started out with 1 as a freshman, then that doubled to 2 as a sophomore, and then that doubled to 4 as a junior. So this is a guy that just had a knack for being in the right place at the right time. Positional flex. This guy transitioned from cornerback to free safety. So you're getting a guy with cornerback experience, but transitioned to the free safety position and didn't miss a beat, even excelled at that position. So you're getting a guy that you feel really comfortable. If you need to drop him over the slot, he can get that done for you. So there's a lot to like here with Jamar Johnson. And finally, he's a willing tackler. He'll come in there and mix it up. Now, I've got something to say about that here in a second, but he is willing, and that's half the battle when we're talking about defensive backs. Weaknesses. You're talking about a guy with average speed. I talked about the 4.58 that doesn't set anybody on fire, that doesn't make anybody feel like we got to have this guy. But, speed can sometimes be something that's overrated, especially when you're a defensive back. If you've got savvy, if you know where to go, you can make up for a lack of speed with know-how and just, understanding route combinations and what this formation looks like and what that means and what they like to do out of that set. You can arrive on the scene early just because you know what they want to do. So I think speed sometimes can be made too much of, but he does have average speed. He does not knock your socks off with his speed, that is for sure. And misses way too many tackles. So for the second time in a row, you drafted a safety in back-to-back picks that, while they're willing to tackle, they're reckless in their pursuit of getting guys on the ground. Johnson, just for me, doesn't wrap up well enough. His isn't necessarily shot out of a cannon. He's reckless. I didn't say he was OC. Notice I chose my words wisely. I didn't say he was OC. He just misses too many damn tackles. I can't tell you how many times he slid down the pole on somebody, where he literally started at their waist and slid all the way down their leg and didn't make the tackle, or he decided, I'm a big boy, I'm going to come in here and drop the big boy pads on you, and they just like, man, you a little guy. You shoe fly, you a little guy, and just continued on where they were going. And so he's just got to be more consistent as a tackler, man. He's got it in him. So my comp for him is Quandre Diggs, a guy that I just love in the league. And everywhere he's been a leader. He's been a guy that's made plays, whether it's in Detroit or in Seattle now. Quandre Diggs is a guy that just, not the fastest guy in the world coming out of Texas, but he used to be a corner, transitioned to safety, and he just knows where to be to make plays on the football. Has a knack for making plays on the ball, but is not afraid to lay the lumber and smash somebody if he's given the opportunity. I just see a lot of the same quality, same type of player, same size, same speed. All of those characteristics are like, one and the same with Jamar Johnson and Quandre Diggs. So that is my comp for him. If he is Quandre Diggs, you got yourself a hell of a football player here in the 5th round. 164th pick overall, safety out of Indiana. Jamar Johnson for me is a 3. As we move on to the next pick for the Denver Broncos, 6th round, 219th pick overall, wide receiver out of Auburn, Seth Williams is the pick. 6'3", 211. So as you can see, 6'2", 224, inaccurate. Okay, 6'3", 211 pounds is Seth Williams. And I'm going to just say this. I think this kid was drafted not to make the football team this year, but rather to be a replacement for Tim Patrick, who is going to leave in free agency next year. I strongly believe that this is the last year you will have Tim Patrick in a Broncos uniform. And because of that, this is a pick for the future, not for now. He'll be on the practice squad, I believe. You've got, unless there's an injury or two, you've got so many receivers. You're so talented there. You're so deep there. I don't see Seth Williams cracking that roster. Not to say that he won't be a contributor at some point this season, but I think this was a pick for the future. Tim Patrick, they're in the same mold, same size, similar speed. I think he's a guy that they view as a Tim Patrick replacement down the road. That said, 36 career games, 132 catches, 2,124 career yards. And the average is something that jumps out at you. It's not massive, but for a guy his size, you don't expect so many big plays. But 16.93 yards, so essentially 17 yards per catch. It's a pretty lofty number for a big guy that's not a true blazer. That said, 17 touchdowns in his career. That's something that you hope is going to continue because he's got the size to be a red zone target. That said, strengths, height, weight, speed, specimen. This is a guy that's 6'3", 210, as we talked about, and ran a 4.5 40. So he checks off all the requisite boxes of a height, weight, speed specimen. Ridiculous catch radius. You're talking about a guy with an 81-inch wingspan. I mean, you look at him, you can see that this guy's super long. Neck's long, arms are long, legs are long. He's a long individual. Pause. So his wingspan is something that gets you excited. You can throw the football up high. He can go and get it. And so that's always the best friend of a quarterback because guys like Seth Williams can make you right even when you're slightly inaccurate. Can go up and get it. That's one of his best attributes is you throw it up to Seth Williams, whether, in the red zone looking to throw a 50-50, towards the corner of the pylon of the end zone, or you're just chucking it 50 yards deep because you got one-on-one with him in a corner. He can go up and get the football. You've watched him do it throughout his career at Auburn in the SEC. Above average run after the catch for his size. I was shocked. This is probably the thing that I was most surprised by watching him is he'll catch it, and then after the catch, he's making guys miss. He's spinning, and he's getting extra yards. You just expect guys his size to just try to run and lower the shoulder, and whatever's there, he'll get it. And if you come with a flimsy arm tackle, he may run through it, but he's actually trying to make guys miss, and at times he's successful in doing that. That was surprising to me. For his size, he's got better run after the catch than I had envisioned. And finally, has big playability down the field. Again, one of those guys that'll sneak up on you. You look at him, you look at his size, you say, okay, this guy can't separate from me. You fall asleep behind the wheel, and next thing you know, Seth Williams is 2 steps behind you. You chuck it up deep to this guy, and the corner has great coverage, but he's so big, he can go up and get the football and make a play. So he's got big play ability down the field. But for all of those good things, there are some things that, you question with Seth Williams. And the first is not an energetic or deceptive route runner. So when I watch him on the field and route running, one of my biggest issues with him, and I'll just lump these things together because I really think one creates the other, he rarely creates natural separation. So what does natural separation mean? So a wise man once told me there are 3 ways to separate at the NFL level. There used to only be 2. You either had to be a supremely gifted route runner with quicks, and the ability to break a dude off, get in and out of breaks, and win with quickness, which is what you see out of slot receivers a lot of times. Or you just had to be pure, unadulterated, fast, speed, a blazer. One of those guys that just because out of the gate you could smoke somebody, you're getting 7-8 yards of cushion. And so you come off the ball like you're about to run a go route. That guy has to respect it. He has to come out of that back pedal and turn and run. You put the brakes on, stop at about 7 yards, and that corner is nowhere to be found. That's Tyreek Hill. Those are the faster guys in the league that can run right by you. You get that kind of respect right off the snap. Now, with the advent of the back shoulder fade, guys are separating with size now. So you can separate with size, and Seth Williams, that's what he has to do now, is he has to separate with size, but he didn't even do that very well. I can tell you this. Watching him, guys were covering him like a blanket. Watching him against J.C. Horn, watching him against Surtain II and guys like that in the SEC. He struggled, man. He struggled to separate. He struggled to give his quarterback an inviting target against sticky coverage, and I think he's going to see more of that at the NFL level. He doesn't separate. There's no stick to his routes. There's no head and shoulders. He's not giving anybody dandruff. He's not a guy that is energetic with his route running ability. Everything looks stale. It looks the same. It looks lethargic. It's easy for you to know where he's going, beat him to the punch, and get there before he does. That's a recipe for disaster at the next level. I'll just say that. And then finally, he loses too many 50-50 opportunities. I mean, this is a guy that I talked about his wingspan and catch radius, and you can throw it up to him, he can go get it. And you see, like J.C. Horn, there was a game. He had 13 targets against J.C. Horn and only had 3 catches. One of those 3 catches, however, was a get off me, 50-50 ball in the corner of the end zone where he snags it and throws J.C. Horn on the ground and then looks down at him like, yeah, get off me, little bitch. But at the same time, Horn was hoeing him the entire game. So, he can do that every now and again, but for the most part, he's a guy that, of those 50-50 balls, you throw up 5 of them, he may come down with 1. And for his size and his length, he should be winning 2 or 3 of those things at a minimum. So there's a lot of questions about Seth Williams. But with that said, a year in Denver on the practice squad, learning from some of these big receivers like Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick, and maybe he is better because of it and ready to contribute as a second-year player. My comp for him is Josh Doctson. I mean, Josh Doctson coming out of TCU had it all. He was 6'2", he was 215, he could jump out of the gym. He was supposed to be a 50-50, maven, a guy that you could throw it up to and he can go get it for you. Wasn't the best route runner necessarily, but he could separate because he could go and get the football. But he didn't love the game. His routes were lethargic. Guys were able to stay in his hip pocket. And it never really, matured into anything at the NFL level. And he's now out of the league right now as we speak. I see a lot of the same qualities in Seth Williams. Now, here's the thing I don't know Seth Williams, and I can't say that he doesn't love the game the way Josh Doctson didn't. But I can tell you that on the field, I don't see a guy that is really demonstrative with the way he goes about his business. He doesn't seem like he's hyper competitive. If he runs a slant and the corner cuts him off, he's like, okay, you got me. And you can't do that on a slant. If that guy cuts in front of you, you got to do your very best to stay in front of that guy so that the ball isn't picked off. He's the kind of guy that you'll mess around and throw a pick 6 because he's like, he beat me to the punch. I'll get him next time. So I don't know. I could be wrong. We'll see about Seth Williams. I don't love him here in the 6th round, 219th overall selection. Wide receiver Seth Williams out of Auburn for me is a 2. Look, he's talented. He's big. He's got a lot of things you can't teach. He can run. He's got a ridiculous wingspan. If he puts it all together, he could be dangerous. But I've got my doubts about Seth Williams. He's going to have to prove me wrong. We get to the next 7th round pick, 237th overall, or excuse me, you get to your first of 3 7th-round picks, 237th overall. Cornerback out of, or I should say defensive back out of LSU, Kary Vincent Jr. is the pick. We'll breeze through these 7th-rounders quickly. 5'10", buck 85. Played corner and safety for the LSU Tigers. Did not play in the 2020 season, opted out. So you got to go back to 2019 to see Kary Vincent be on the football field. That said, 39 games, 87 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 16 pass breakups, 6 INTs in his career. His strengths: this guy's a track athlete with legit wheels. Man ran a 4.33 at his pro day. He can flat out fly. All right, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and you can see it on the football field. Tremendous fluidity and change of direction and to planting drives. This guy, when he figures it out, and he hasn't done that, far from it as a matter of fact, but when he figures it out, he's going to be a hell of a ball player because he's got all the twitchiness. He's got all the tools to be right in the hip pocket of these receivers and, hell, even in position to make plays on the football. He's a tremendous athlete, man, and he's fluid. He moves around the field easy. I'm telling you, when he figures it out, and that's part of the reason he didn't get drafted sooner, is because all of the physical attributes are there. I don't think he has it from a mental standpoint yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but all the physical tools are there with Kary Vincent Jr. When he sees it and he goes, he gets there in a hurry. His acceleration is through the roof. It's off the charts. And again, you can see the track background in Kary Vincent Jr. Has ball skills. When he gets there, he can make plays. My favorite play is in the playoff game against Oklahoma. He goes up and gets a football. They try a trick play. He doesn't fall for it. He's playing safety on the play. He gets back there and makes a leaping interception. It's a gorgeous play. So he can make plays on the football when given the opportunity. Offers positional flex. This guy played a ton of slot for LSU. Also played some free safety for them. So he gives you a little bit of positional flex. I think he's more of a slot at the next level. Plays the nickel. But we'll see what they decide to do with him in Denver. Weaknesses: he's more of an athlete than a skilled DB at this point of his career. And so let me elaborate on that. The next weakness, I think you can tie the two together: lacks route recognition and instincts. He's not a guy that sees it before it happens and plants and drives and he's making a play on the football. His eyes right now are deceiving him because he's like, okay, I think I know what's about to happen, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to wait a tick longer. And then because he's so fast, because he has the acceleration, at times he'll get there and still be able to make a play on the ball. But had he just reacted as soon as he saw it, he could have picked it off. And so when you watch Kary Vincent, there are too many times where he's giving up easy things underneath, or he's allowing guys to separate when they shouldn't, because he simply doesn't trust his eyes. He's not skilled as a defensive back at this current juncture of his career. He's more of a track guy playing football than a football player that can run track. And finally, he takes questionable angles as a tackler. He's a guy that just simply isn't adept as a tackler at this point. There are times where he just, guys shouldn't be, you're 4.33 athlete, you shouldn't be having guys turn the corner on you, but he takes such poor angles that guys are able to turn the corner on him. My player comp for him is Kenny Moore, a guy that I absolutely love in the league for the Indianapolis Colts. I remember him coming out of Valdosta State and thinking to myself, man, this guy has some talent, but, small school guy, what is he going to do? He's morphed into one of the better nickel corners in the league. He can blitz. He can play the nickel, the slot. He can do a lot of things, and he's been a Swiss Army knife for the Indianapolis Colts. I see a lot of that in Kary Vincent Jr. if he can put it all together. He's got some talent. Here in the 7th round, 237th overall pick, senior cornerback out of LSU, Kary Vincent Jr. for me is a 2. I'm intrigued by him, but he's got a long way to go before he develops into the type of player I think he could ultimately be. Second 7th round pick, 239th overall selection, edge rusher out of the Ohio State University. Jonathon Cooper is the pick, 6'3", 253, edge rusher out of Ohio State. 46 games, 15 tackles for loss, 10 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 2 pass breakups, and a blocked kick in his career. His strengths: he looks the part. You look at him, he's well put together. He doesn't look any different than Bradley Chubb. They look one and the same. He doesn't look that much different than him, comparing them side by side, although Chubb is probably a lot bigger and thicker, but they don't look that much different. He looks the part of an NFL edge rusher. Above average get off. When this guy times it up, he can be a problem off the snap. He's got some juice off the edge. when you're talking about him syncing up the snap and getting off the football. Quick hands to defeat blocks. The thing, look, so he was one of the more highly sought after edge rushers coming out of high school. He didn't live up to the billing, but he was coached by one of the best defensive line coaches in college football, and Larry Johnson. Both the Bosa brothers, Chase Young. You've seen some dynamic guys come into the league. Yeah, those guys are really talented, but also they're really skilled, and that's not coincidental. Larry Johnson is a master in terms of teaching guys how to use their hands, and you see some of that with Jonathon Cooper too. He does have some quick hands to defeat blocks, and a lot of that credit goes to Larry Johnson and what he does with those guys. Devastating crossover, that's his best move, where he sets you up like he's going outside and then quickly crosses over, goes inside. That's his best move right now as a pass rusher. Need to see more of that, and he needs to build off of that move as well. Bull rush has a little juice. It's not dominant, but because he has some quickness and he has a crossover, you're looking for the finesse stuff. He comes with the power. It can be problematic at times. Enough athleticism and agility to drop into coverage. I saw him do that like 3 or 4 times on tape, and I was like, whoa, that wasn't half bad, actually. So he's got better athleticism. This guy ran a 4.69, one of the faster edge rushers in the draft. So he's got some athleticism to him, does Jonathon Cooper. Weaknesses, not one distinguishable physical trait or capability. Like, there isn't one thing that he does that you say, man, that blows me away. Like, that right there wins 9 times out of 10 at the next level. He's just good at a lot of things. He's not great at any one thing. Nothing really stands out. And that's really how his career went at Ohio State. Nothing really stood out about him. He kind of just fit in with that talented group of defenders. No secondary rush. If you stalemate him with his initial rush, he's really got nothing for you on that secondary rush. There's no secondary spin or anything like that. If you stall him out on his initial rush, you got him. Average to below average impact in the run game. I don't think he's impactful at all in the run game, really, and that's a problem for me. And really, maybe he'll be a little bit better against tight ends in a 3-4 defense as an outside linebacker, which is probably what he'll be featured as in Denver if he makes the football team. But I saw tight ends kick his ass too in the run game as well. So I thought he could be a little bit better in that regard. And underwhelming collegiate production for a guy that was as highly touted as Jonathon Cooper was. He didn't put up the kind of numbers that he was expected to do. And again, I get it. There were a ton of talented guys in front of him, Nick Bosa and Chase Young, and the list goes on and on. But still, he was supposed to be one of those dudes, and he just wasn't. So a little disappointing there. But my player comp for him is Ryan Anderson, the ex-Alabama edge rusher. The only difference between the two of them is Ryan Anderson a lot more physical in the run game. However, I see a lot of similarities in their rush abilities, and I see guys that have some physical traits and tools, but nothing that really stands out above the rest of them. So I thought Ryan Anderson was overdrafted by Washington, back in the 17 or 18, I think it was the 17 draft. Thought he was overdrafted then, and Jonathon Cooper is probably going where he's supposed to go here in the 7th round for the Denver Broncos. 239th pick overall, edge rusher out of the Ohio State University. Jonathon Cooper for me is a 2. As we get to the final pick in this draft for the Denver Broncos, 7th round, 253rd overall. Edge rusher, defensive lineman, I should say, out of Mississippi State. Marquiss Spencer is the pick. 6'4", 301 pounds. 51 career games, 22 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 3 pass breakups, 1 INT in his career. His strengths, he's strong, man. He's really, really strong, and you see it at the point of attack. Active, high motor guy. I think he's always got a motor that continues to run. I've heard people really say that his motor doesn't run hot. In the games I watched, I just saw a guy relentlessly competing, just always ending up a day late and a dollar short, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. I think his motor is high and it's active. Shows flashes of a guy that may be able to generate pressure at the NFL. He's got a really quick first step off the snap. He plays with a level of quickness. I think some of that was affected this year by some extra weight that he put on. And then he's got a spin counter that I don't think he uses enough, but when he uses it, it's very effective. So he's got some moves that may be able to translate to the next level of a guy that may be able to get to the quarterback and maybe produce a little bit of pressure. His weakness is, look, he always seems to be a step too slow, man. This guy just seems to never get there on time. He's a guy that always seems to be one step behind the quarterback. He flushes him out of the pocket. Quarterback's able to beat him, be contained, and get to the outside. He gets into the backfield. Running back's able to outrun him. He just seems to always be there one step too slow. He gets blocked way too easily in the run game. This is a guy that I feel like, for as big and as strong as he is, he gets blocked way too often in the run game. It's just ineffective as a run defender and not as impactful as I think he should be. He's on the ground way too often as a defender as well. And again, another reason that I just don't understand sometimes with Marquiss Spencer is he's a big guy, he's a physical guy, but yet he's always on the ground. I really can't explain it. And then finally, he's got some injury concerns. This is a guy that in 2018 had an upper body injury that forced him to redshirt in 2018 after 4 games. And then in 2020, he had his season short-circuited by an injury to his lower body. Only played in 9 games and then was out for the remainder of that season. So, there's some issues here with Marquiss Spencer. We'll see if the Broncos are able to get the most out of him. There's some people that think he should lose some weight, get a little bit lighter. I think he's a 5 technique at the NFL level. And so the 300 pounds that he weighs right now, I think is probably going to be right around where he'll be. Maybe if he gets to 295 or 292 or something like that, he'll be more effective as a 5 technique. But that's what he is at the NFL level. I don't think he can reduce inside. He's not stout enough as a run defender. I talked about that already. So I don't think this is a guy you reduce inside. But in certain situations, you reduce him inside. Maybe he could be a bit of a problem as a pass rusher. We'll see. But, in the 7th round, Marquiss Spencer out of Mississippi State for me is a 2, man. I mean, it's one of those guys you just throw a dart at in the 7th round and see if it sticks. I mean, we'll see what happens with him. So overall, for George Patton in his first draft, not bad. I love what he did early on in this draft. I didn't necessarily love all the things done late, but some of those guys that you took flyers on late in the draft, I don't have any problems with them. You go through this draft quickly. Your first pick, Patrick Surtain, the corner out of Alabama, obviously a 5. Running back Javonte Williams out of North Carolina, a 4. Quinn Meinerz, a 4 out of Wisconsin Whitewater. Baron Browning out of Ohio State at the linebacker position, a 4. So you started out the draft really hot. I thought things simmered down a bit after you selected Caden Sterns. I thought it was a little not early necessarily for him as much as I thought Jamar Johnson was the better of the 2 defensive backs, and that's why he received a 3 out of Indiana. You go to your 7th pick in this draft, Seth Williams, a receiver out of Alabama, out of Auburn. This is a guy that, big, long, athletic wide receiver, but, just seems to be missing that competitive edge. We'll see if he's able to turn it up at the next level. Kary Vincent Jr., he's a track guy playing football, and until he becomes a football player that has a track background, he's just going to be another guy that can run really, really fast at the NFL level. And then edge rusher Jonathon Cooper didn't live up to the hype at Ohio State, but has some traits. We'll see if he's able to become, the next version of Shaq Barrett for you, a guy that's, a little bit further down the depth chart, but a solid guy off the bench that emerges down the road. And Marquiss Spencer, is a guy that I look at and I say he's going to have a tough time making his roster, but, if he comes in, surprises some folks, shows some of the things that people liked about him at Mississippi State, maybe he makes this roster. I'm not a big Marquiss Spencer fan. Overall, you tally up all those scores. You get a 30. You divide by the number of picks, 10 in this draft. You get a 3 overall for this draft. Not a great score for the Denver Broncos draft, but it got watered down by some of those late picks. You had a bunch of 7th rounders, 3 to be exact, so it kind of watered down the score of this draft. With that said, this was a solid overall haul for George Patton in his first draft as Broncos GM. I thought he did some really, and look, really, you just want to hit on the guys at the top half of the draft. If you're going to have 10 picks, you're going to have some guys at the back end that, aren't as impressive. And so I thought he killed it at the beginning of this draft. We'll see if those guys prove to be, what you think they are. And then maybe hit on 1 or 2 of those guys back into the draft. Maybe hit on a Seth Williams and a Kary Vincent Jr. or something like that. We'll see. But this was a solid draft. Not one that I'm overly thrilled about, especially the back end of it. But I love what they did at the front end of this draft. We'll see if it turns out to be a big-time draft and a franchise foundational building draft for the Broncos moving forward. But that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Remember, get off the bench, get in the game, and kick it with me, your man Louie T. Until next time, I'm your man Louie T. Have a good one, and see you for the next installment of the 2021 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series.
LouieTeeNetwork.